Hello viewers, welcome back. This is Subathra Mylsamy, partner at AK Mylsamy and Associates. Today's topic is going to be on the Domestic Violence Act of 2005, a topic which a lot of us are aware of, but I'm going to deal in depth about this act. Domestic violence is the most common form of violence against women, and women were always considered weak, vulnerable, and in a position to be exploited. Cultural mores, religious practices, economic and political conditions may set the precedence of initiating and also perpetuating domestic violence. But in societies with a patriarchal power structure and with very rigid gender roles, women are often very poorly equipped to protect themselves if their partners become violent. Now let us see who is called as the aggrieved person or the victim and the respondent under the Protection of Women from the Domestic Violence Act. So in general terms, aggrieved person or the victim here refers to the person who usually faces or undergoes the violence or the abuse. The person who conducts or constitutes the violence is generally referred to be as the respondent, against whom the aggrieved person or the victim files an application against the violence. Now, what is domestic violence under this act? Now, under the act, it is defined as any act, omissions or commission or conduct of the respondent shall constitute domestic violence in case if there is harm or injures or endangers the health, safety, life, limb, mental or the physical well-being of the aggrieved person or the victim here, causing any kind of physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse and emotional and economic abuse with a view to coerce or any other person who is related to her to meet any unlawful demand for any dowry or other property and has the effect of threatening the aggrieved person or the victim or any person who is related to her by any of the above conducts. Let's hear out the applicability of the act. Now this act is applicable to any woman who is or has been in a domestic relationship with the respondent, wherein here the domestic relationship means a relationship between two persons who live or have lived together in a shared household when they are related by consanguinity, marriage or through a relationship in the nature of marriage, adoption or a family members living together as a joint family. The most important aspect to note here is that the relationship between same-sex partners, which is lesbians, is not covered under this act. Relationship between unmarried adult woman and unmarried adult male who have lived together in a shared household falls under this act. And also unmarried women unknowingly who are entering into a relationship with a married adult male, and such relationships may be also a relationship in the nature of marriage. Now let us look into the types of abuse under the Domestic Violence Act. One is the physical abuse and also the sexual abuse. Now, physical abuse means any act or a conduct which causes any kind of bodily pain, harm, or it endangers one's life. It can be or their limb or their health or impairs their health or development of the aggrieved, here meaning the victim, and also includes any kind of assault, criminal intimidation, and criminal force. The most common form of abuse, sexual abuse, includes any conduct of a sexual nature that abuses, humiliates, degrades or otherwise violates the dignity of the woman. Everyone is aware of the physical abuse and also the sexual abuse which has been dealt for a long period of time. But there are two abuses which are being majorly overlooked in our society and people find it very difficult to recognize it. And I'm going to talk to you about these two abuses, which is the emotional abuse and the economical abuse. Emotional abuse. Many women always find it difficult to understand what is the emotional abuse, and it is a fine line between sacrificing and compromising in a family. Now, what is the emotional abuse under this act? Any kind of insults, ridicule, humiliations, name calling and insults or ridiculed, especially with regard to not having a child or not having a male child. Repeated threats to cause any kind of physical pain to any person in whom the aggrieved person, which is the victim, is interested. Now, psychological abuses are one of the major forms of abuses faced by women. Emotional abuse is a form of abuse that can be very harmful and damaging as much as physical abuse, but it is often less visible and less understood. Emotional abuse can take many different forms, including verbal attacks, belittling comments, manipulations, and isolation. It is a form of abuse that targets a person's self-esteem, confidence, and a sense of self-worth, and can have a devastating effects on their mental health as well as their well-being. One of the major challenges in addressing emotional abuse in India is the stigma and the shame that surrounds the issue. Many women may hesitate to speak out or seek help due to the fears of retaliation, of cultural norms that prioritize family honor over the individual well-being. There is also a lack of awareness and understanding about emotional abuse among the general population, including the law enforcement and the healthcare professionals. Emotional abuse can be particularly harmful in our culture, where women are often expected to prioritize their family needs above their own, and where traditional gender roles can reinforce power imbalance in relationships. The next form of abuse which I'm going to talk about is the economic abuse. So under this act, it is defined as deprivation of all economic or the financial resources, household necessities for the aggrieved person, which is the victim, and her children, if any kind of sidana or property, either jointly or separately owned by the aggrieved person, disposal of household effects, any alienation of asset valuables or shares or other property, prohibitions or restrictions to continued access to the resources or the facilities which the aggrieved person is entitled to use or enjoy by virtue of the domestic relationship, including access to the shared household. In India, economic abuse is particularly prevalent due to the deeply entrenched patriarchal culture that prioritizes men's control over the financial resources and also reinforces traditional gender roles. This can make it difficult for women to assert their financial independence or seek support if they are experiencing economic abuse. Economic abuse may take many forms such as coerced debt, employment-related abuse, preventing the victim from using certain funds like using the victim's ATM cards without her knowledge and preventing her from using the same, deciding how the victim must use her money in her account, etc. Economic abuse can also have a long-lasting effect on women's mental health and their well-being, including depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem. There is a lack of awareness and understanding about the issue among the general public, and few legal protections in place to support women who are experiencing such kind of abuse. Recognizing economic abuse is an important step in addressing this issue. The Supreme Court of India, in a case called as the Lalita Topo versus State of Jharkhand and others, has held that the definition of domestic violence under this act includes economic abuse as a form of domestic violence too. Now let us see the legal course of action. Now, any woman who has been harmed or who has come to know about any kind of such harm can go and complain in the nearby police station or to a protection officer under the Domestic Violence Act. Now, the court may appoint a protection officer to conduct the inquiry and also prepare the domestic violence incidental report. Now, who is a protection officer here? So, a protection officer is a unique position who is intended to serve as a link between the domestic violence victims and the legal system. What are the reliefs under this act? Now, Domestic Violence Act relief orders can be obtained by filing a complaint directly with the magistrate, and within 3 days of filing such complaint, the court will schedule a hearing. If the court determines that the allegation is true, then a protection order is being issued. Now, the aggrieved person or the victim or a protection officer or any other person on behalf of this aggrieved person may present an application to the magistrate seeking one or more relief under the Act. The first relief under this Act is the protection orders. So the magistrate, after making a proper inquiry, can pass a protection order in favor of the aggrieved person or the victim and also prohibit the respondent from committing any acts of domestic violence, which includes alienating any assets, operating of the bank lockers or the bank accounts which are being used either jointly or separately, and also the prohibits the respondent from using any kind of the sidana or the property which is being held either jointly or separately by the parties without the leave of the magistrate. The magistrate also has the power to prohibit the respondent from entering any of the work premises of the aggrieved person or the victim, or if the person who is being aggrieved is a child, its school or any other place which is frequented by the aggrieved person. Attempting to any kind of communication in any form can be prohibited with the aggrieved person, including any kind of personal, oral, written or electronic or telephonic contact. Next is the residence order. Here the magistrate has the power to protect the aggrieved person who is staying in a shared household by passing orders restricting the respondent from entering the shared household or his relative also from entering the shared household. Now, he can also restrict the respondent from entering any portion of the shared household in which the aggrieved person resides, restraining the person from disturbing the possession of the victim. The magistrate also can restrain the respondent from alienating or disposing of the shared household, and the magistrate can also direct the respondent to secure the same level of alternate accommodations for the victim as enjoyed by her in the shared household, or to pay the rent if the circumstances require. The Supreme Court of India, in the case of Meghna Khandwal versus Rajat Khandwal in 2019, has clearly held that the husband has to pay the maintenance even if the wife is well educated and working as well. Another interesting case by the Supreme Court is the case of Srimat Haimanti Mal versus the state of West Bengal. Here, the Domestic Violence Act provides for compensation and damages for the injuries, including mental torture, emotional distress caused by the respondent's acts of domestic violence. To sum up, I would like to conclude by saying that the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act of 2005, which came into effect in October 2006, is a promising piece of legislation that combines both civil and criminal punishments to provide effective remedies to the domestic violence victims. So for the purpose of determining whether any act, omission, commission or conduct of the respondent constitutes domestic violence under this act, the overall facts and circumstances of the case has to be taken into consideration. The statute clearly establishes protection officers, medical facilities and no-fee orders, among other things, to assist the aggrieved women in safeguarding themselves and their families. In India, the majority of economic abuse, sexual violence and marital rape instances go unreported. Addressing emotional abuse among Indian women requires multifaceted approach that involves not only providing support to the victims but also addressing the cultural norms and the gender inequalities that contribute to the problem. I hope this video would have been useful for all of you all. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.